Morning and welcome to Haventree Parent Podcast, where we get a chance to talk about something that's important to us and to you before our kids wake up.
Today, we are going to be responding to 10 things that parents of children with cancer want you to know.
This article is written in 2017 by Huffpost, and it's just about the 10 things that parents with kids with cancer want you to know and be aware of. All right, so the first one is be positive.
Yeah. So this is something that's interesting. It's hard to hear, like, oh, my grandma died of leukemia. And you're like, are you trying to prepare me for my kid's death? Like, I don't know. Sometimes people just say silly things that are like not very helpful.
Oh, when you mention that brings a lot of memories back. Yeah. So when people were, that response where you tell people like, my kid has leukemia or something, and then you get a really interesting sort of response and story of like, something that might not be so great. So stay positive is the better way to go. I would agree with that for sure.
I think on the flip side of that, like not being flippant about it, like, oh, well, treatment now is great. It's come such a long way. Because that's also like not very helpful unless like you are a pediatric oncologist. Like I would prefer not to hear that from you because more than likely you don't know a darn thing about treatment for childhood leukemia. So I think that there's kind of a balance between like being positive and being genuine, So being encouraging, being kind,
You're adding more to the 10 things.
Those are important, but not being flippant. And also like, when my child was just diagnosed with cancer, it's not the time that I want to hear that somebody that died from cancer. Like that, even if that's like the first thing that pops into your head, like just keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Same with like, I don't know if this is on there or not, but like avoid comments about the hair.
Katie's 10 list is over there.
Just I know, like you think like,
I don't even need this article.
Cancer, kid, their hair falls out. Like, yes, yes, but like,
and she was cute.
And she was, oh my gosh, her head. I didn't know this because I've never had a bald baby before. All of our babies have had lots of hair when they've been born. But when Kenzie's hair fell out and she was totally bald, her head was like the softest thing that I have ever felt in my entire life. I mean, like, and it was just not expected. I expected it to be like sweaty or like sticky, like just normal skin. And it was so soft. Like it was softer than like a baby with hair almost. Like,
I've never shaved my head entirely, but I always like go down to this nice low level. And usually they're like, let me feel your
fuzzy.
head. Yeah.
No, it was soft, and like she got tired of us rubbing her head. But anyway,
she'd like take your hand off of her head.
Like stop.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I've heard people say that
so soft.
Their head hurts as well.
So, but just avoid the comments about hair. Like people, I don't know. Like there were all sorts of comments. Like one person was like, "Wow, I hadn't noticed how long her hair had gotten because she was 2.5, and she never had a haircut." And it was just like you could kind of hear like the unspoken wheels turning, and like and it was all I could do not to like burst into tears and be like,
not bring you up the fact that we just cried in the last video because of talking about it from 2 years ago.
I was trying to forget about the cry.
Sorry,
never happened.
Never cried on podcast.
Never. I never cry at all. I am tearless. No, had those things removed.
Dried out. Yeah.
So, try to avoid the comments about the hair too, if you can. Just because I think that's the other thing that people think is like, oh, I know somebody that died with cancer, or like, when is her hair going to fall out? And like, neither of those are helpful.
So be positive.
Yes.
Number 2, I think.
Yes,
maybe
go
7.
for it. Number 2.
Is it 7? The fight is not over when chemo ends.
Yeah. So, and we'll talk a little bit probably about this in another podcast. But, obviously one of the things is that there's lots of side effects from the chemo that does not end when the chemo ends. Additionally, there's lots of damage that is long-term, that is lifelong, that can happen from chemo. It's going to take about 6 months, even after we're done with chemo, before Kenzie's immune system recovers. So, I was thinking, okay, this is our end date, and then we'll be able to go back to life as normal. But really, this is our end date for treatment, and it's going to take another 6 months before we can even consider life as normal, right?
Right.
So, that, for us, it takes time. Even once chemo's done, for the immune system to recover. Mm-hmm. It takes time, or may never change, for some of those side effects. Kids who have gone through treatment for cancer are, I think the statistic I read was like between 60 and 80% of them have chronic lifelong conditions because of the chemo, and so, one of the things we always say is like, we are actively and constantly over the last 2 years have been giving our daughter poison in order to save her. And like, it's kind of, like we say it lightly, but it is true. Chemo is very harsh. It does a lot of rough, terrible things to the body. And even once that's done, those things don't all just disappear. Similarly, then you take, like right now for Kenzie, we're taking medicine for the side effect of seizures, and the seizure medication also has complications and side effects that we have to manage.
Yeah. So it's like taking this, plus taking that, plus taking this to head off any sort of extra,
right,
issues.
And then I think the other part of that is, there's always the fear of relapse. And I think no matter what I've heard and what I've read and what I expect is that no matter how far away from treatment, no matter how far away from, evidence of any disease, you still always worry about relapse, Mm-hmm. There's always sort of that in the back of your head where once upon a time, like, cancer's never going to happen to us. Mm. Once cancer has happened, then there's always sort of this, like, it becomes a little more real, I guess, that like it could happen again. I never thought it would, and it did. And it could. And so there's that, I think, dynamic as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Number 3 or 7.3, childhood cancer research is severely unfunded.
Yeah. So there's a really cool group called Fourth and Gold. Gold is the like awareness ribbon for childhood cancer. And so the whole, the idea behind the name for Fourth and Gold is that 4% of funding for cancer research goes to childhood cancer, all childhood cancers. And there's a lot of different childhood cancers out there. There's a lot of childhood cancers that still have zero answers, zero prognosis for remission or cure. There's lots of childhood cancers out there that have been doing the same treatment plans for decades, which in the medical community typically is kind of embarrassing unless it's like 100% successful and perfect and there's no side effects. So, a medical plan not changing for decades, when it's not great is, kind of problematic. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of times, and this is not true with all cancers, but a lot of times, there is the treatment plans for kids are based on the treatment plans for adults for a lot of types of cancer, which is a little bit foolish as well. Kids' bodies are different. They metabolize drugs differently. They have different side effects. So just saying, well, we're going to give, this child a smaller dose of chemo because it works well on adults is not wise, not effective. It's a whole different ballgame when you're talking about kids.
Right.
And so there's a lot of ways that being underfunded is really problematic, especially when kids die more from cancer than all other illnesses combined.
Right. I think it's the second on the list of childhood death is
childhood cancer. I believe is the number one cause of childhood death.
Oh, okay.
And like I said, the deaths, all of the childhood cancer deaths in a year, that number is larger than all the rest of the deaths for childhood illness combined. So, I mean, when you're looking at statistics, it's huge, for it to be so poorly funded.
Yeah, fair enough. There are no special treatment options to combat childhood cancer.
So this is probably talking about what I had just mentioned, that a lot of times what is used for adults is translated into what's used for kids, and that's not always a good translation. So it makes it difficult.
Yeah, I think there was some Facebook groups that we followed for like kids with cancer or parents with kids with cancer, and then people were sort of ask about that sort of thing, and like I think most of it gets referred through like St. Jude's type of hospitals and like other stuff where they're like, oh, I'm looking to get into this program for a study or something on some new medications or whatever, but
they're few and far between too. I mean,
it's not an easy thing to get into. Like, they have to meet some categories. They need you.
The parents. Yeah. Again, this is probably something we'll talk a lot about later, but having a kid with cancer is so isolating. It's really difficult. I hesitated to talk to parents on the oncology floor. I think the one time, the one parent you met, like in the like family room on the oncology floor, was talking about, the fact that there was no other treatment, and it was just sort of like, we're trying to manage symptoms and waiting for her to succumb to this, and that's difficult to hear. It's really difficult to hear, it's difficult to hear, from parents who have kids going through a similar treatment and they've experienced like all of these horrible side effects. On the one hand, you kind of want to know. And on the other hand, you don't want to know because then you're terrified that it's going to happen, And so I often found that I kind of avoided other parents of kids with cancer, because there's always that potential to hear like the worst case scenario, and I couldn't bear it.
Right. Because the potential could be that we would be facing that next, because they were, they're 2 phases ahead of us or somewhere else on the treatment plan line. And so it wasn't relatable at the moment because we didn't know where we were going.
And then on the flip side of that, our friends loved us and didn't really know what to say, and our friends continued with their lives, which they should, and we didn't hold that against them. But it was also kind of hard to hear sometimes, what they were doing, or what their kid who was the same age was learning, or that their kid was in T-ball and our kid is, in a hospital bed, and so it's not that we didn't want to hear those things, because I still wanted to know what was going on in my friend's life, but it was also very difficult. And so it is just, and then there's like the literal isolation of being in a hospital room. And so there's so much
waiting on chemicals. Yeah.
There's so much isolation, that happens. And so the thing that I appreciated more than anything, from our friends when we were in the thick of treatment, was just like them sending me a message like, hey, how are you doing today? Like, hey, I prayed for you today. Hey, what's new with Kenzie? And just kind of like putting that little bit of a bridge out, so that if I wanted to talk, if I wanted to like say, I've been sitting in the emergency room for 3 hours and I'm stressed, or if I wanted to say like, or I didn't want to talk, and I could just say like, well, as well as can be expected and just like shut the conversation down. I could do that. But it really was the most supportive way to just kind of like, just, you know, reach out that hand, so that if I needed it, I could take it. And it really was the most beneficial thing that people did, was to just, you know, reach out. And there are a lot of people that I didn't expect, that, you know, I don't talk to regularly or whatever, that would just send like a message that was very open-ended. And I could respond to it if I wanted, or I could say thanks and that'd be that. But it was the most valuable.
Definitely. Number 6, don't ask if they need help. Of course they need help.
Yes. So this is the other thing.
I almost brought this up on the last one, but I saw it coming.
Yeah.
So
this is the other thing. Don't say, can I bring you some coffee today? I'm at Starbucks. Like, say, can I bring you a meal this week? What day? Say, do you need anything from the grocery store? I can pick something up. Say, let us know if you need us to watch your dog. Say, let me know if you need me to watch the other kids while you go to the hospital. Say, can I come and do your laundry or clean your house while you're in the hospital? All of these things, whatever it is that you're willing to do, offer that. Because it was always so uncomfortable for me to say, would you mind to watch my dog?
Mm-hmm. Here's my big request. Or I don't know what to request right now, but if you come up with a suggestion that's going to be easier to accept than it will be for us to conjure up what we're thinking and feel like we're asking too much.
Because here's the thing. Some people really like dogs. They don't want their own dog, but they love dogs. And so they would love to come and watch our dogs for us, right? Other people hate dogs. Maybe they're afraid of dogs. But I don't know that. I don't know that. Same with kids. Some people would love to have my kids 3 times a week. Other people really like a quiet house, and 4 extra kids is overwhelming, right? And I didn't want to ask too much of somebody. I wasn't going to just like call up my friend and say like, hey, do you mind to grab me a cup of coffee? But I surely, if my friend said, I'm at Starbucks, can I bring you coffee? Yes, I would love that. You would make my day, right?
Right.
So to just kind of say, I would love to do your laundry while you're gone. I would love to clean your house, watch your kids, take care of your dog. Whatever it is that you're willing to do, whatever it is that you would feel comfortable doing and offering, put it out there. Because those things, I can write that down and say like, next time we have to go to the hospital, I know that Erin will watch her dog, or, you know, whatever.
Right. And we definitely had a list of people that were like, well, I want to help with this. I want to help with that. And
that was so helpful.
And that was helpful, definitely. So
whereas saying like, what can we do? I don't know, because honestly, I don't know what day it is. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
I don't even know which way is up right now.
Yeah. So it sort of gave us a sort of list to go to. We're like, okay, we need this. We need the dog to be watched. We need the kids to be watched. So we'll call you, call them. And then we can organize. And that helped our schedule.
Yeah.
And probably my work schedule as well as getting her to treatment and getting me to keep my hours going.
Yeah. And people anticipated things like before we could even, which was the other thing that was beneficial. You know, they would say like, let me know if you need me to whatever. And at the time we were like, okay, thank you. Not thinking that that was something that I would necessarily need. And then 2 weeks later, that would come up, and it would be such a relief that I already had somebody offer to do that. And so genuinely, you may think that it's not a big thing. You may think that it's not a helpful thing, but if it's something that you have, can do, are willing to do, want to offer, just reach out and do that.
Yeah.
Or say, I'm willing to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if there's several things. But genuinely, that is so much more helpful than saying, let me know I'm willing to do anything.
And because this leads into number 7, they need to take mental health days.
Yes, so much so. It is difficult because I did not want to leave Kenzie. I still have a hard time leaving Kenzie. Like the other kids, I'm like, yeah, I need a little bit of a break.
I had to push a lot for her to go on a break and just let her, to get her to get in the car and drive away from the hospital with me and Kenzie
Not
still
gonna
in
happen.
it. It was very challenging for her.
I don't think it ever did happen.
I think I got you to leave like once, like after several months.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like in the first, few weeks even. It was definitely a longest time that you would allow yourself to do that.
And it was like I would like walk to the community room at the hospital and just like sit and stare at the wall for 30 minutes or like
I think I got you went to
go
the
get
McDonald
breakfast
house like once, I think.
their room or whatever.
So getting you to go
never
out and just be away, step aside for a few minutes, because I could see that you needed that mental break, and so I was your biggest relief because I was getting enough mental breaks for myself because I was still going to work and whatever, but I knew I could see that you still needed that, and I didn't know how to provide that more for you. So,
and I think that the other thing too is like mental breaks can be about like getting away, but they can also be just literally about providing like less noise or less stress. And so in some ways for me, the best mental break was knowing like I had people to handle some of the other like to-do items, other things that, as a mom, as a manager of a house, I still am supposed to keep up with. And so to have other people in my life that were willing to like pick up some of those just like mom tasks so that I didn't have to think about them or worry about them or juggle them or stress about them was some of the most mental break relief that I got and that I wanted. So there are lots of ways to provide that, I think.
Definitely. Number 8, they don't want to hear your miracle cures. There was definitely a message that we got. I think it was on Kenzie's Crew Facebook page. Somebody messaged and was like, hey, there's this cool thing that, whatever Dr. somebody has figured out. And, if you are interested, contact yada yada. And it was just like, I'm not going to chase a rabbit hole. We're already got a team of oncologists at Cincinnati Children's that have this big plan and have done this. So I appreciate your idea of a cure, but
and I think that like those things come from a good place.
I'll mention it to the doctor team and they can figure out what they want to do about it.
I do have a friend who she handled this in the best way, where she knew of it was like a meal supplement, like think protein smoothie-ish, but not at all really like that. Meal replacement kind of shake designed for kids. That had lots of vitamins and nutrients and things that she gave her child like at breakfast every day. She loved it. She felt like it helped him get sick less, different things like that. And she reached out to me and she said, there's this thing that I really like that I use with my son. And I would like to provide you with a supply of it if you want it. I will buy it. You will have it. But, here's the ingredients. You can check with your doctors first, make sure it's okay for her to have. But it's something little that I thought, if you would like it, I would like to provide for you. And I thought that was really kind. Kenzie, went through a phase where we had trouble getting her to eat. And so, we had a lot of concerns about getting enough nutrients in her. And it wasn't like this cures cancer and does all of these cool things. It was just simply like, this is something that we like. And I'm not trying to sell it to you, and we've used it a lot. We've liked it. It definitely wasn't something that we used every day. But it was the kindest way to offer them. No strings attached, no trying to sell you something or like put more stress on me of like, maybe if you eat organically, you would cure her, or maybe, because I think a lot of those things are well-intentioned. But it's also one more thing to like try to keep up with and worry about, whatever. Like if eating organic cured cancer, hospitals would be doing it, right? Like, or that would be at least part of the treatment plan. Mm-hmm. Now, certainly I'm not knocking some of those health choices, because there is research that suggests that they are helpful, but they don't in and of themselves cure cancer. And sometimes they provide more stress or more guilt or, I don't know, more false hope. And none of those are really, I think, what most people are intending to do. So I think it's just really important to consider the fact that typically those things aren't helpful. But there is sometimes a way to like approach that conversation safely and without piling on the parent.
Sure. And definitely like a parent's looking for something and asking about stuff.
Right.
Like if they're seeking that information, then provide that to them. So,
right. If they ask, like that's a different story. But saying like, my aunt had breast cancer and she went to a chiropractor and that healed her without any chemo. My daughter does not have breast cancer. She is not a 57-year-old lady. And I am not trusting a chiropractor to heal something that will kill her. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just not even. Like if I said, we're looking at chiropractic, as something to include in our treatment regimen, then you saying like, my aunt used that for a very different type of cancer and it helped her, she feels like, that would be appropriate. But otherwise, keep that to yourself because it's not helpful to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understood. You may see a child with cancer laugh, smile, or have a head full of hair. That child is still sick.
So this is kind of an interesting, like there were a couple of times where people have said that. And like sometimes it was encouraging and sometimes it made me want to smack somebody. So we had somebody come over and they said, looking at her, you wouldn't even know that she had cancer. Mm-hmm. But it kind of came across in like, are you sure that she really has cancer? Yeah, I am. I would not be doing all of this and, pumping her full of poison if I wasn't pretty darn sure. So thank you. I'm glad she looks healthy today.
Because there's definitely days, that we saw that she wasn't out in front and, in the limelight or whatever you want to call it, where people were able to observe her. There was days where she was laying in her bed or at the hospital and,
miserable.
Looked green to us, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And those are, the memories that are probably hardest to share. Because you don't want to think about your kid being weak. And so, it's hard to see, when they are having that positive day of laughing, smiling, and full head of hair and whatever. You love that. But, it's good to have the positivity, definitely.
Right.
But it's, still hard to be like, well, they were feeling awful like 2 weeks ago when they had their ARC pumped through their system and, they were inches of toxicity levels from, having their, blood blown out. I don't know what you would call it. So.
Yeah. And I think that
system
is
broken. So
I think that is something to keep in mind is I think a lot of times those comments are meant to be encouraging. I had a nurse say that once. She was not an oncology nurse. We were in like surgery. And she said, honestly, I didn't even know that she was a leukemia kid until I looked in her chart. She looks perfect. And it was the way that she said it and like the context in which she said it was encouraging. It was your baby is sick, but she is also wonderful. And so it had a very different sort of feeling behind it. And it was a way to encourage. But I do think it's really important to be cautious and remember that like sometimes that comment of like, wow, I forget that she's sick. Like kind of is like, I'm glad that you can forget that she's sick. Unfortunately, if I forget that she's sick, she could die, like I could ignore something simple.
Right. You're the one they're usually catching the puke anyway. So once that starts happening, I'm leaving the room and, I'll get the towels. So,
yeah. So I think it's just important to remember, like, it just because they look healthy doesn't mean that they are. And so be gentle and be thoughtful in the way that you say those things because they can be really encouraging. They can be really meaningful. But there has to kind of be some context and thought behind saying those things. Yeah.
And the last one is just that you can help, which is again what you're saying. You can help. So
that is, I think in so many ways how we've survived, I can't imagine doing this journey without the people that have helped us and encouraged us and come alongside of us. And I said it before in our last podcast, and it's still true, that, you know, there are people that reached out, people that we didn't even know, people that I haven't seen since I was, you know, an elementary student myself, that heard, saw, found out, that, you know, sent us food. We had somebody send us like a box of like the Omaha steaks or whatever, you know, and that's something that like I literally have not seen probably since I was 8 years old. You know, we had people regularly messaging us saying like, hey, we're praying for you. I got a message from a lady that made a baby blanket for me, who is, I think she's in South America or South Africa. And it's really embarrassing that I can't remember right at this moment. Who sent me a message, and she was like, I want you to know that every single week, our Bible study here in whatever country she's in is praying for Kenzie, you know? Yeah. And it was just so meaningful, you know, that people halfway across the world are praying for her weekly, you know, or like we've had companies reach out and say like, hey, we want to, you know, do something to support you. What's something that we can help with? Yeah. You know, we've had organizations reach out and do things for us that we weren't expecting, and that were difficult for us to even accept because it was so overwhelming.
Yeah, and you never know what to say in those cases. Like, people would walk up at work or whatever, and they'd be like, here's $40, get pizza for your family tonight. Or, you know, we're putting a collection together and we'll get it to you by Christmas. And
and it's
whatever.
Like, those things are wonderful, and they also are so overwhelming. And like,
you have nothing, you don't know what to say. You're just like, I just shared my, you know, why I look downtrodden at work. You know, my kid's going through this, and I'm still beat up about it because I can't think about anything else. I think for that first week, I was still like, I can't focus on my job right now.
And those things are just so wonderful.
Yeah, no, totally wonderful. But you have nothing to say in response. You're just, I didn't expect anything. So, thank you. You know what I mean?
But realize those are the little moments that provide a lot of encouragement. And I think that if you remember that everybody has a unique gift, everybody has unique skill, everybody has a unique circumstance, the things that you come up with as a way to support somebody else, regardless if it's childhood cancer or something else entirely, those will be meaningful. So I encourage you to throw them out and share them. But of course, we would also love to hear what other ideas you have of ways to support parents of kids with cancer or with other illnesses, or even other family members or adults that are struggling with a health condition. We would love to know what else has helped you or ways that you've helped somebody else.
Right. So make sure you hit like, subscribe, follow, all those things, and we will see you on the next adventure.
Bye.
Bye.